Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pavithran. Stories. Here we go again. Today we heard a lot of stories. Since I was a child, I was always fascinated with stories and cinema. Even though, ironically, my first cinema experience was I'm screaming inside a cinema theater as a baby. When I grew up, I loved cinema, which especially told authentic, sensitive, socio-political stories. So when I grew up, I started to ask questions about how cinema and architecture can be the tools, the possible tools to narrate the socio-political narratives of the people. But why do we need stories? Why do we need to tell the stories? For a very small island nation, we Sri Lankans had a very complicated and sensitive modern political history. In this context, movies and monuments, cinema and architecture can be the tools to empower the political narratives of the people for reconciliation as well as the everlasting peace. But why these stories are very difficult to tell? Why these stories are sensitive? So this horrific war not only created soldiers and unimaginable suffering, but it also created multiple narratives and storytellers. This is a story about the people who picked up camera and chose to tell the stories of the people. This is a story about them, the storytellers. In order to understand a story, first we must understand its context. Kilinochchi is a small agrarian town shaped with war, conflict, destruction, and recovery. Surrounded by public market, public bus stand, and public school, and presently a military camp. The site is where charged memory as well as daily activities coexist. So in this context, in this particular context, our storyteller arrives. But today, he sees something different, something he did not understood. It's not a military camp, it's not a victory monument. It was something else. Intrigued. When he ventured into it, he came across a civic node where the narrative exchange between different generations, for example, from a school student to a distant traveler, happens. Now we are entering into the first chapter where memory becomes alive. So when our storyteller moves into the site, he notices survivor trees scattered all across the landscape. The survivor trees act as temporal markers and living memorials. When he is passing through the survivor trees, the grids of columns turns into this memory maze, which creates intimate commemorating spaces, but it also rejects singularity and monotony. So each journey and each pathway becomes unique and subjective. So when our storyteller moves through this maze, he reaches this earth mound, which seems to be growing with constant participation and plantation by the people. But this earth mound seemed to reveal some structure. What is this structure seemed to grow out of this earth mound? Now we arrive at a point where memory becomes a process. And he moves through the thresholds of the earth mound. He reaches the sunken corridor, where the outside seems to seep in. Through this ambience, he reaches the upper level. For the first time, he sees on the one side the forecourt area spaces which he already experienced, and on the other side, the curved walls carve out these discussion pockets into this linear corridor. So when he ventures into one of these spaces, he sees storyboards, mood boards, posters, props, discussions and debates, and more than anything, there was cinema inside. So what all these random spaces or random functions comes together, what is the meaning of all this? In order to understand that, first we must know a juxtaposition. When the horrific war destroyed the memorials and cemeteries, people couldn't rebuild them due to multiple political reasons. So what they did was they erected an earth mound out of destroyed rubbles as well as destroyed tombstone and planted around it and commemorated the memory for the past 17 years. So what they did was, literally, they made a presence out of absence. You cannot destroy absence. It makes the entire memorial process infinitely powerful. So this presence of absence cannot result in a singular monumental memorial, but rather a functional absent memorial, a place where memory is practiced, preserved, processed, and narrated. A cinema school. So now we are arrived at the chapter where the memory becomes action. When he arrives at the Central Cinema Plaza, suddenly the memory and stories becomes a celebration. This is the Cinema Plaza where the film festivals and public exhibitions and collective gathering happens. But through the explosion of elements, he notices something apart from the towering structure. It's a structure underneath. That is the prototype mobile cinema. This idea reimagines cinema as a cyclic process from memories to stories and cinema itself reaches the people, not the other way around, and people reinforce the story and memory. So this is a cyclic process. The multi-tiered system allows the reach of this program towards the underprivileged and faraway communities. The material and color palette is inspired from the thick red earth of Kilinochchi. The red clay bricks, the weathered steel details, all reinforce this idea of red as an action, just like Bernard Schumi says. And the white tarpaulin detailings accentuates throughout the design. The wartime adaptations have influenced the construction philosophy of the context. The layered construction technique have resulted in an architecture which is functional and yet intentionally left incomplete and ephemeral stage. Now he sees the towering structure, It's a point where memory becomes power. The tower is none other than a repository of narratives. It is a library for individual stories. So anyone can come here and record their stories in multiple formats without discrimination. So the cinema which made here will be made from individual stories, real stories. So when our storyteller records his story, the archives becomes full. So what happens is, when the archive becomes full, the structure allows it to be vertically expanded. So this structure is something growing from individual stories. One day, it will become the tallest structure of all of Kilinochchi, built from individual stories. It gives a poetic justice for the oppressed narratives. So ultimately, here architecture becomes an incomplete puzzle which requires constant participation and contribution from the people. It is not set in concrete. So all of this, for even a single mother story, becomes a higher art form of cinema, then we would consider this story a success. I am Pavithran. This is everything in between the presence and absence. Thank you.